Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 450 chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it just wasn't running right. Sometimes it would bog, other times it would run perfect. So I've already been through this a little bit. I've looked in the fuel tank. I test ran it. What I found was that it wouldn't respond to carburetor adjustments consistently. I found the same thing the customer did. Sometimes it would run perfect. Other times it would bog a little bit. South of Montello, you can go to the Amish place and get me a pecan pie from the bakery. There's a lot of choices. Where it says Amish bakery, just whip in there and get me a pecan pie. I feel that the metering diaphragm in the carburetor probably needs to be replaced. These things that I mentioned are somewhat symptoms of that problem. You know, other symptoms could be that it never gets fuel at all and you can't get it started. Or it floods all the time because that stiff metering diaphragm is holding the needle open. In this case, it ran pretty good sometimes, pretty crappy other times. So we took the screws out that hold the air filter holder on. Now we're removing the throttle cable. And you saw I held the throttle open, and now I'm using my finger to keep that throttle open and create a little bit of slack in that throttle cable so I can remove it. We've got some fuel lines that need to come off. And there's also some clips that hold the carburetor to the intake manifold. We could call that intake manifold an insulator block, insulation wall. There's different names for it. There goes a fuel line, and we've harvested one carburetor. I'm going to put a plug in that fuel line, just keep the gas from spewing out of there. Alright, so you saw I pulled off the fuel pump cover. The micro screen didn't look like it was plugged up, and I really didn't expect it to be, because usually if they're plugged up, it'll run kind of good initially until it really demands more fuel, and then it starves out. That wasn't the case when I test ran it. What I found was that it was just inconsistent. This cover's really kind of stuck on here. There we go. Oh, we're trying to peel that metering diaphragm off of there. Yeah, it was stiff. So even if this saw has some other issue that's making it run weird, that diaphragm's got to be replaced before we move forward. So I'm loosening the screw that holds the cross shaft for the metering lever and the needle in place. There's our needle. New spring goes in. Put the kickstand under the carburetor. You'll see in some future or other videos that I've got that after this repair, I built a little bit of a carburetor stand. And boy, that little stand works wonders. Okay, our needle is in our metering lever. We drop the needle into its home and make sure the metering lever is over the top of the spring. Push the cross shaft into place and then tighten down the screw. First time you ever do that, it's kind of a fumbly job. The 1800th time you do it, it gets a little bit better. So now we have our new metering diaphragm in place. This one does not click. Our metering cover and some screws. So this is a 450 Husqvarna. When I'm on the sales floor and someone's looking for a saw and they don't know what they want, this is the one I always start with. It's kind of in the middle of the build quality, being a 4 series in the Farmer Rancher grade. And it's kind of in the middle of the engine size range at 50 cc's. I mean, it's not the smallest saw, and it's not the biggest saw either. I guess you could argue that 50, 60 cc's somewhere is in the middle. This saw is pretty popular. You know, if a person's ever run a saw this size, we talk about if it had enough power or more than enough power, and then we move up and down the line from there. I think it's probably one of our most popular sellers. So here we're putting in our new micro screen, just getting it lined up, and then we'll push it down into place. If you don't get it lined up just right, you end up pushing it down kind of crooked. Here's our fuel pump diaphragm and gasket. You see, I hold the throttle linkage open a little bit so that that idle stop screw does not interfere with my lining up the cover over the top of the carburetor. Looks like we got it all lined up decent. We'll crank the screw down. Okay, we put a kit in the carb. We're calling this refreshing a carburetor. Alright, main fuel line. You'll notice on the front of the carburetor there's a brass fitting that sticks out. That is the impulse line. It comes from the crankcase. And there is a hole in the intake boot where that pulse comes through. So you got to get that little fitting lined up in the hole when you're pushing the carburetor up like this. And on this model there's a couple of plastic clips that'll grab and hold that carburetor right there. We got our throttle cable. We're going to roll that back into place. Yep, we got that. Upper throttle plate. Well, it's going together a little easier than it came apart, eh? What do we got? There's some wires that go to the kill switch. We want to try and properly route those. We got to get them down and away from the choke linkage. Then our air filter holder. Getting that in place and getting the kill switch choke lever into place. Once they're all lined up, it'll feel good and you'll know it's there. Until then, it just doesn't feel like the air filter plate is flush on the front of the carburetor. So don't get carried away with torquing these things down into plastic. And then the rubber saddles that hold the back of that air box, we'll stick that back together. Put our air filter on. We'll see if it runs. I mean, it ran before. I guess we'll see how it runs. So you'll notice I had a problem trying to adjust the high-speed jet on the carburetor. And that's because I didn't properly route the kill wires. And one of the wires is kind of running right in between the hole in the side of the case and the adjustment screw. So we're just going to take something and push it down back where it's supposed to be so that I can physically get the tool onto the adjustment screw. So that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 450 metering diaphragm swap. Thanks for watching. Later.